So hello everyone. Thank you once again for coming. I think that China today has become this buzzword of our century. I cannot imagine any conference without um, having China panel there. And on the one hand, it's a great that we're starting to pivot our minds, our mindsets from the West to the other part of the world, which is very important, and a lot of interesting things are happening there, as we know. But on the other hand, because of the peculiarities that we live in, because of the changing information bubble that we live in. There are a lot of misleading information, stereotypes about this country, and it leads to not so good results and misunderstanding between our societies. And I guess saying that it's really important that we have this panel today with the great experts, because I hope that thanks to this panel, we will be able to break some stereotypes about China, and you might learn something new. First of all, I would like to thank the audience for coming this Friday morning. And also I would like to thank every single expert that you've dedicated your time for that. If you have any questions, you can use the chat function here or Q&A. Also, we're live on YouTube, and I guess there is a live chat there. So if you have any questions, you can also send them there, and we will be happy to answer them. So without further ado, I would also like to thank our participants who have done a great job in analyzing the main trends that are happening in the second largest economy of today's world, and came up with the topics that are not usual, because the topics that I see in the program today, they are not very much discussed in student conferences in other places that I've been to. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Victoria Pozrakova and Anna Sharmazarian. Yeah. And we will start our discussion from the basis, I would say, of China Miracle, about Chinese economy. If we have Anna and Victoria, the floor is yours.
Yes, we're here. Good morning. Vika, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, but I experienced some troubles with the camera, and I don't know how to fix it. If it's possible,
I guess it's okay if you don't switch on your camera if there are problems.
Okay, thank you very much for understanding. Well, good morning, dear colleagues. Our topic is from made in China to design in China. And nowadays, and today, we're going to speak how Chinese brands are going global. Next slide, please. Chinese brands have become a part of consumers' daily lives and continue to make a personal connection. The vitality of China's innovations comes from the revolutionary reforms over the past 5 years in China's science and technology system. Measures have been taken to encourage brain gain, increase funds, and improve promoting innovations. In the slide, you can see a quote of Hua Guoqing, a professor at the University of Chinese Academy of Science. In fact, Chinese companies have been a key driving force of global cross-border business, and they have kept innovating products and services to respond to changing trends and global consumer demands. In the past, as we'll remember, Chinese companies were considered the suppliers of products made in China, with a focus on expanding quantity. Today, they have upgraded to manufacturers of products created by China. They bring in Chinese brands to the global stage by adopting an international mindset and methods. And I must say, the prospects are promising. Next slide, please.
I guess there are some troubles with the positions of slides. Okay. We're going to talk about four great inventions of modern China. We are all aware about four great inventions of ancient Chinese culture. However, did you know about, yes, thank you. Did you know about high-speed rail, Alipay, bike sharing, and online shopping? They are supposed to be the four great inventions of modern China. They are leading a new trend in convenience and efficiency and are changing the livelihoods of Chinese people. Although the technologies of these new inventions did not originate in China, they were first devised decades ago. China has outspaced other countries in its widespread adoption and adaptation of all of the four technologies. Speaking about high-speed rail, this technology originated in Japan and Europe. However, today China's high-speed rail network is in the world's number one in traffic, and Chinese companies supply different European countries and Middle East countries with their high-speed railway technologies. Speaking about Wechat, it is an application that almost every Chinese would use as a communication tool, a social platform, and even a wallet. During staying in China, it's highly recommended to download Wechat so that you could keep in touch through free Wechat video calls. It's also worth mentioning electronic commerce. With the advent of the mobile internet era, China has now become the world's largest online retail market, with more than 800 million internet users and more than 200 million online transactions per day. It took only 5 or 6 years for China to reach the world's largest e-commerce country from a society without personal credit. And mobile payments, of course. More Chinese living in cities have forgotten what a wallet looks like, as most services such as booking accommodation, paying for bills, grocery shopping, and the smartphone replaces many other services. So next slide, please.
Today, the world is getting to know China through its brands. We would be able to name a few, easily to name a few, like Huawei, Alibaba, Xiaomi. But recently, hardly anyone in the world could even know how to name these brands correctly. But now, associated with these names Chinese products and Chinese innovations that continue to grow as the most disruptive power to the global market, and they redefine the meaning of made in China. Made in China no longer just stands for supplying the world with factory goods. It increasingly implies a different perspective on how a product can solve a problem or create new consumer demands and unlock new opportunities. However, this change is challenged by reputational issues imposed on Chinese brands by political tensions and trade conflicts. That is why it's more urgent than ever for these brands and for other brands to build better understanding and trust with its publics, consumers, business partners, governments, and even employees. Relationships that help them rebound from crisis and adversity. Next slide, please.
Yes, it's obviously we have some repositioned version of the presentation, but it's all right. Okay.
And a great example how Chinese brands are going global and how Chinese inventions are going global is Anna, could you please find a slide with the high-speed railway? Yes, thank you. Due to generous funding from the Chinese government, high-speed rail in China has developed rapidly over the past 15 years. China began planning its current high-speed rail system in early 19th, and it was modeled after Japan's railway system. Chinese high-speed rail service began working in 2008. China has imported most of its systems through joint ventures with Japan, Germany, France, and other countries. But nowadays, as you can see on the graph, Chinese high-speed railway is one of the most popular kinds of transport in China, and the country exports high-speed trains to other countries like Germany, where even Siemens trains are now already not so popular as Chinese ones. Next slide, please. And Chinese high-speed railway continues this ambitious plan to build out the system to connect all of the regions. As you can see, the financial viability of the network, which already exists, continues to improve as traffic grows, and the use of more flexible demand-based traffics and regular fare adjustments have a potential role to play. Maybe China wasn't the country which invented high-speed railway, but for now it is a country which has the most developed system, and it spreads it worldwide. Anna, now it's your topic.
Okay, unfortunately, we are not able to see the graphs about WeChat because only 1 minute left. However, let's talk about Didi, TikTok, Huawei, and Xiaomi. Just mention them and say that they are now a very important part of worldwide economy, and that they are widely known in the world. And Didi is now expanding their market in Russia. However, they are not in Moscow and St. Petersburg still, but they are expanding really intensively in the European and central part of Russia. So, in conclusion, we would like to sum up that global trade has long been a hallmark of Chinese business culture. Since the establishment of trade routes along the Silk Road, there has been a flow of innovation, products and services from China to the world. Innovative Chinese companies continue to export to global markets, often redefining customer demands and introducing new experiences and technology. Through global supply chains, they are making significant investments in designing and developing new products and services, looking to fulfill the needs of sophisticated worldwide customers. So there are several graphs on the presentation concerning TikTok, Huawei, I guess, and Xiaomi. And it is also worth mentioning that Huawei have recently sold their operational systems to the Moscow government. So it is really their systems, not only phones, but operational systems, they are also in demand, and they are actually designed in China. And countries worldwide choose designed in things and sophisticated goods which are designed in China. So thank you for your attention, and sorry for a bit complicated way of presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It might be my mistake, so I'm sorry for this mess. I guess if we have some kind of these troubles in the future, you can just start talking and I will adapt the slides according to your talk. So thank you very much. It was really interesting. I guess if the audience has any questions, they can go ahead and ask them in the Zoom. You can raise your hand and I will see you and give the floor to you, or you can use the chat function. What is interesting in Chinese miracle and in this whole great results that Chinese economic system is showing is that we all know that China is not a fully democratic country if we compare it to other developed economies. But we used to think that for becoming a great economy, you should have a developed democracy in your country. But China is showing another example of achieving economic goals without democratization. And here, our other students have analyzed how China achieved those goals and what is this system that China has created, and whether it's an interesting model for other countries to follow. So here I want to give the floor to Svetlana, Rudy, and Polina Yegorova.
Good day, dear experts and participants of the Student Gaidar Forum. My name is Svetlana, and today me and my colleague Polina would like to tell you about a unique phenomenon named socialism with Chinese characteristics. Next slide, please. China is one of the economic leaders and plays a vital role in the modern political system. In our report, we will tell you how exactly the system helped China to achieve such outstanding results and find out whether other countries will be able to use the Chinese model of socialism. And right now, I want to briefly tell you about the evolution of this idea. Next slide, please. And of course, we should start with Mao Zedong and his ideas. He believed that only after revolution it would be possible to build a fair society. He also changed Marxism, gave it an Asian form to get rid of the influence of the Soviet Union. Next slide, please. Deng Xiaoping decided that monetization is desperately needed, and he saw that the transition to a market economy can be considered as a departure from the principles of socialism. Next slide, please. The next era is known as a harmonious society, and it presupposes attention to social equality, social protection of the poor section of the community, and reducing differences between urban and rural areas. Next slide, please. And recently, Xi Jinping has unveiled a plan to make China a great modern socialist country, and he set 3 goals that you can see on the screen. And by the middle of the 21st century, the following goals will have been met. And Xi Jinping also argued that China was blazing a new trail for other developing countries seeking to modernize and preserve its sovereignty. Next slide, please. And now I want to focus on the results that have been achieved since the recognition of this idea. And of course, it is clear that China's gross domestic product has seen a dramatic increase. Next slide, please. And China's extraordinary economic boom has gone together with urbanization, and the urban share of the population has grown significantly. Next slide, please. China also succeeded in eradicating poverty, improving healthcare and education system, and improving living standards. And all things considered, China succeeded in creating its own model, combining some Western ideas with the principles of socialism. And now I want to give the floor to my colleague Polina.
Thank you, Sveta. So after successful reforms, which were accompanied by economic liberalization, many experts claimed that political liberalization would be the next step. But what do we see right now? So on the next slide, you can see the first trend, which is party control. So the party is determined to build the strongest ruling party in the world, and China claims to have an effective democracy. That is why they, for example, give more seats in the National People's Congress to workers, farmers, women, so that to represent more grassroots voices. But at the same time, party leadership is codified into law, and sometimes, as the party demands absolute leadership over political and legal work, it sometimes devalues, disregards the law, and bypasses state legal requirements. For example, recently, Xi Jinping organized a crackdown on civic and religious activists, journalists, ethnic minorities, and so on. So those deemed a danger to the party are handled outside the law. Besides, the relative lack of rule of law and less transparency, accountability have led to widespread corruption, financial speculation, and mislocation of investment funds. Next slide, please. So Chinese return to the person-centered control system is also obvious. Once in power, Xi Jinping started an anti-corruption drive targeting some of the country's elites, and actually he just removed his own rivals. Besides, he is now in charge of all the key bodies, mostly all key bodies overseeing economic reform, foreign affairs, internal security, and so on. And besides, as we all know, he also saw the removal of the term limits on his presidency, which allows him to stay in power for life. And on the next slide, we can see that Chinese foreign policy is becoming more and more intense. China has produced some projects like Belt and Road Initiative and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. On the one hand, Belt and Road Initiative is beneficial for boosting in some industries, infrastructure and employment, but at the same time, it has led to numerous adverse effects on countries. For example, some developing countries like Sri Lanka have ended up with financial debt burden because of these Chinese activities. And besides, China is corrosive of democratic institutions, increasing corruption and undermining financial independence. Moreover, party tries to manipulate the information space to China's advantage, and this practice is now called sharp power. So the party uses a lot of tools like media outlets, official propaganda, or covert efforts to just cultivate thought leaders. And in the next slide, as a conclusion, we can say that China is now eager to follow its own path without blindly copying the Western model, and it tries to stick to its own cultural roots and develop an advanced culture right now. And it means that China is not really willing to change and adapt to European trends. We think that Chinese system is still unstable and unfortunately not ready to be a role model for other developing countries because Chinese economic growth has been accompanied by rising inequality, massive environmental pollution, corruption, and of course, one of the most repressive regimes in the world. And besides, China usually ranks from 70 to 80 on a ranking of nations on a per capita basis. Here you can see the data of the World Bank for 2019, but now the data changed a little bit, and actually, China has overtaken Russia because its Chinese GDP per capita is now $10,500, while Russian GDP per capita fell to $9,900. And some experts say that in a decade or so, China is ready to overtake the USA as well. Next slide, please. In our research, we also compared the effectiveness of the government administration in China and some other countries by using the governance research indicator country snapshots. And as you see, we compared different categories like absence of violence, voice and accountability, and so on. And unfortunately, the data for China still leaves much to be desired, as the majority of numbers are at the same level as for developing countries, or even much lower. And besides, Chinese return to the person-centered control system, increasing power control, just make China unattractive for other countries to be their role model. So that is why we think that now China should focus on its own issues, growth, eradicate political instability, economic inequality, and perhaps review the party's role of of the party in the political system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a really insightful presentation. Thank you for that. I would like also Andrei Dagaev, who is one of the experts of today's panel and who was helping you with this presentation, to give a little comment on the Chinese model of governance and how it's replicated or not replicated by other countries. As far as I understand, in your research, you came to a conclusion that it's not very much attractive for other countries. What's your opinion, Andrei?
Good morning, everyone. And firstly, I want to thank Svetlana and Polina to the great presentation, and I wish it will help you somehow to write a great thesis in the future. Speaking about points you have mentioned about social with Chinese characteristics, I basically agree with all of your conclusions regarding its political and economic traits or features. And why I agree with your opinion that Chinese socialism can be replicated in other countries. Firstly, and basically because China's leaders expressed this opinion for several times. They won't export its governing model overseas. Yes, they definitely buy some corrupted regimes like Sri Lanka for loyalty. For instance, Sri Lanka or Pakistan. They also expand its presence in new regions like the Arctic or Africa. However, China is still like a closed book, and they intend to dominate mainly in economic sphere. And the last point I want to stress out is internal and external challenges which socialist with Chinese characteristics will face in the near future, and add some new information or insight to your conclusions. As Svetlana and Polina said, China's socialism is quite young in historical perspective, and its stability could be questioned, I believe. And the first group of challenges are internal challenges. After reforming the electoral system of Hong Kong and suppression of opposition here, China, if it want to realize the dream of reunification with Taiwan, have to find out some ways to lure Taiwan to the one country, two system model, because it was bankrupted, I believe, by Beijing, and made Taiwan politicians and society even more aggressive to Beijing internal politics in this field. The second one is China have to rebalance its government model in the country, because nowadays Chairman Xi became a core of CPC, but he will leave office eventually due to biological reasons. So if and in the future he will not control the country and party as effective as now. So I expect, or I guess, they will go through political transit in the nearest 10 or 15 years. I can't make an insight, but I just guess that it will happen somehow. And the last one is external traits to socialism, Chinese characteristics, and it based on the development of their soft power overseas, because China spent vast resources to the media coverage of Belt and Road Initiative, or to external loans, or even cultural and language presence in overseas, but it's still unable to persuade the rest of the world that it's somehow constructive player in the international affairs. And like propagandistic movies about beautiful Xinjiang didn't debunk rumors about repression in the region, and so forth. So if Chinese leaders desire to make country greater and strengthen its power, it should go from economic superpower to credible one in the next 10 to 15 years, I believe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I see Vasily Lemotov has a comment or a question. And I want to introduce Vasily. Is an associate director for international cooperation in N+ Group. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Timur. I'm very proud to be invited to this event, and I'm very happy to be with you here. Thank you very much, Svetlana and Polina, for your presentation, and Andrei for your comment. Well, actually, as far as I can see, China has shown the world the example of the country that can be economically successful without being a democracy. And that's a lesson that many countries learned from that. But here you discussed some political features of Chinese governance. Of course, there are repressions. Of course, there is corruption, and so on and so forth. But I think it's not directly correlated with the main thing that is attractive, that is tempting for other countries when they think about China, when they want to adopt its governance model. The most attractive thing is, of course, its tremendous economic growth. And so my question is, do you have any insights? Do you have any ideas? Can China successfully export its governance principles for fast economic growth? Can it be achieved? Maybe it's some inherent feature of China, of the mentality of the people, or some other unique features that just cannot be exported? Or are there can some principles be formulated for other countries to achieve China's success?
Thank you very much, Vasily. Who wants to answer the question? I can try to start with the example of the region that I'm following for the last several years. Central Asia, these 5 countries are looking at what is going on in China and how China is developing very closely. And actually, if you know the new and already so a year in power, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, the president of Kazakhstan, he is a professional China watcher, and it's really symbolic that he became a president of the country that is so close to China. And actually, we have seen several movements from those countries to adopt some of the Chinese practices in several directions, from poverty elimination to the use of technology in security, etc. And but on the other hand, we really should understand that the Chinese model is unique for Chinese society and Chinese political leadership, and cannot be replicated by any other country. Some of the elements of it is might be copied or adopted, but not the concept. So this is my opinion. Maybe other experts or students have their own. And actually, we were talking also about Hong Kong and Taiwan. We will be having this presentation a little bit later on how those autonomous regions are integrated into bigger China. But now let me move actually to another topic, to ecology. And Vasily actually helped our student Elena Grishakova to make this research on how China is going to become carbon neutral till 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason, I guess, for China to declare this very ambitious goal is that for the last decades, we've seen how this economic growth, unprecedented economic growth, created so many problems, not only in the ecological terms, but also in social and political terms, and how the Chinese society was, let's say, not happy with the outcomes of these great economic achievements. So, Elena, can you please tell us about how China is going to do that, and what will be the cost?
Good morning, dear colleagues. Today I'm going to give a talk about one of the most ambitious goals that China has ever had. Please turn to the next slide. So at the meeting of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2020, Xi Jinping announced that China was ready to ratify the Paris Agreement on the climate change. And since China is the world's leading manufacturer and the world's largest source of carbon emissions, the news has come to a surprise to many researchers, even in China, because they haven't expected such a bold target. So the main question can be seen on the next slide, and it runs as follows. Is China's new target available? Based on in-depth research of local emission data and experts' opinions on the matter, it is estimated that China has economically attractive and socially viable avenues to achieve its decarbonization goals. And we are going to prove these theses following the plan, which could be seen on the next slide. So to start with, we are going to outline the significance of China's goal for China and the world. First of all, following through will put China in a leadership position among major countries. Secondly, China's decarbonization initiatives provide great opportunities to accelerate technology innovation and industrial upgrading, and this actually may lead to further strengthening of the economy. Moreover, we shouldn't forget about that health, quality of life, and well-being of the citizens are strongly linked with reducing emissions and pollution. And moreover, achieving the goal will lead to securing greater crop yields, avoiding natural disasters, and increasing energy independence. So on the next slide, you can see the significance of China's goal for the world. And as I've already mentioned, China is the single biggest annual carbon emitter, and its commitment moves the international community closer to the achieving of the Paris Agreement goal. And actually, it would be almost impossible if China were to continue its businesses as usual. In addition, China is setting an example for other countries because in a few weeks following the Xi Jinping's announcement, Japan and South Korea committed to decarbonization goals too. So to achieve the goal it's essential to understand what are the main reasons of such a great scale of pollution in China, and the details could be seen on the next slide. And we understand that the root causes of China's carbon emissions are its economic and industrial structure, and the country's economic structure is still highly energy intensive, and that's why energy system reform is required. And now we are going to look at the models which illustrate how the reform could be done. The next slide, please. So the first model was conducted by Tsinghua University's Institute of Energy, Environment and Economy. And under the project, the next slide, please. For China to achieve its target, electricity production would need more than double by 2060, largely from clean sources of energy. And the share of non-fossil fuels in total energy demand will grow from 15% last year to 84% in 2016. And as it can be seen on the next slide, this growth would be driven by a massive ramp up of renewable electricity generation over the next 40 years. Including a 7-fold increase in solar power and a 5-fold increase in wind sources of energy. However, fossil fuels, including coal, oil, and gas, would still account for about 16% of energy consumed. So special technology is needed, and this technology is depicted on the next slide. It's called carbon capture and storage technology, or CCS, and it is needed in the plants where it has not already been implemented. Speaking about the dates, on the next slide, you can see that according to the plan, China's carbon emissions are projected to rise to about 10 billion tons in 2030, and will decline dramatically to about 200 million by 2016. And on the next slide, we can see the costs. Shifting China's economy away from its dependence on fossil fuels in such a short period of time will be very expensive, and advancement needed to meet the target could total $15 trillion over the next 30 years. Moreover, there will be a tremendous opposition from industries that rely on coal and fossil fuels. Last but not least, many experts are skeptical about the CCS technology because it will increase the plant cost of electricity generation significantly. And now we are going to look at the second project. The next slide, please. So this project was introduced by the Institute of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Tsinghua University. And we are going to take into account 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario because it's more radical and allows China to fully achieve its goal. So in terms of the dates, you can see on the next slide that under this scenario, primary energy consumption will be about 5 billion tons of coal equivalent by 2050, and CO2 emissions will reach zero by 2060. Speaking about the costs, which are provided on the next slide, by 2050, total energy demand will have reached 5 billion tons of coal equivalent, and in the power sector, over 90% of the electricity will be generated by non-fossil fuels, and less than 5% will be generated by the coal. On the next slide, we can also see that by 2050, all greenhouse gas emissions will have been reduced by 90% from the peak levels. So under this plan, all the expenses will cover the shift from non-fossil fuels and installing of CCS technology, just the same as in the previous project. So these are the projects, but now we are going to give a brief look at what is happening in the reality. The next slide, please. And as you know, the whole world had been waiting for the country's 14th five-year plan for social and economic development, which was released in March 2021 and was expected to include policies to achieve neutrality. And it is obvious from the next slide that on the one hand, the document gives an insight into how Beijing is planning to get on the track to achieve its climate goals. But on the other hand, analysts are sure that the plan does not evince any preparedness to put a stop to using coal for energy generation. Instead, the Chinese officials mostly rely on country's natural potential for carbon sequestration and so-called nature-based solutions. The next slide, please. So natural-based solutions to address climate change have already been taken into account by the Chinese government, and the great amount of work is being done on running various programs on the matter. However, it has been estimated that these measures cannot manage with the whole volume of CO2 emissions, and such measures as planting of greenery, for example, can be mostly regarded only as additional and supporting programs, which should be used in combination with more radical changes in energy and industries. So, making a conclusion, although the path of the country will follow to reach neutral emissions is still not clear, and we don't know exactly when China will achieve its goal, there are a few things that are clear about China's new ambition. First of all, the rest of the world really needs China to succeed because China's emissions account for more than 20% of annual global emissions. Moreover, we know that the country's economy is relatively carbon heavy, and that's why China requires to eliminate many more metric tons of CO2 than any other country of the world, and by itself it's an enormous challenge. Moreover, making Xi Jinping's pledge a reality will require new technologies, and the total cost of the effort will be substantial. It may cost about 2% of China's cumulative GDP. So these are the potential problems and the expenses China might have. But at the same time, China can reap tangible economic benefits from the aggressive climate change program because it can become a major supplier for other countries seeking for reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So if China can play its cards smartly, it can position itself as the leader even among major countries. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elena. Here I would like to give the floor to Vasily. Maybe you have some comments about this ambitious goal of China, whether it's doable or not, or it's just a used for propaganda stuff.
Thank you, Timur, and thank you, Elena, for a brilliant presentation. Well, first, I would like to say a couple of words about the background, so about how China came to the decision to announce this carbon neutrality goal. I think we can view the environmental question for China in 3 dimensions, at least 3 dimensions. The first one is competitiveness. So for many years, China didn't do anything about pollution, about the environmental problems due to production costs. As Elena said in her presentation, the environmental efforts impose huge additional costs on production. And so it would just kill the competitiveness of China's industry, China's manufacturing. However, then around 2010, the next dimension came into play, and it is social stability. The levels of pollution were so high that it caused it could cause social instability, and so for to achieve in order to mitigate this problem, the government decided to tackle the problem of pollution. And actually, we can see that the Chinese government was and is very pragmatic in this issue. So they, at that time, it was the 12th five-year plan, I suppose. They didn't declare any clear goals about climate. The main thing was air and water pollution. All those programs like green grass, blue skies, or something like that, that was all about eradicating, eliminating pollution. However, in the recent years, especially after the ratification of Paris Agreement, one more dimension came into play, and it is the international one. Now we see that climate issues are very rapidly weaponized. They are used as a weapon to fight other countries. And I think the new administration in the US does exactly that. So Biden is on the way to demonstrate that, to say that all the countries who don't adopt climate goals are enemies of the future world, and so on. And I think that China and the Chinese government felt this trend quite early. So they ratified Paris Agreement, and they started adopting the real climate goals. Of course, as Timur said, it's a very good question whether these goals are just propaganda in order to not fall under sanctions for climate and so on, or the real ones. But I think that actually it's as always, it is somewhere in the middle, because of course it is a very big goal that I think it achieving it in 2060 is very ambitious, but there are several tricks here. When Xi Jinping said that China will achieve carbon neutrality, he actually did not specify what carbon neutrality means, because it may be just CO2 neutrality or all greenhouse gases neutrality, and it's a very different things. Of course, achieving just CO2 neutrality is easier. Moreover, there may be some tricks, as Elena said, with nature-based solutions. So they will count every tree and say, okay, this captures all the carbon that we emit from plants. But still, we see that China makes real progress in renewable electricity, like, that fields consisting only of solar panels, a lot of wind generation, a lot of decarbonization efforts in manufacturing and industry. That's all goes on, and so even if China will trick its way to achieving the real carbon neutrality by 2060, it still will make a very ambitious, a tremendous effort towards this goal. So even if we don't see the true carbon neutrality in 2060, still China will have done a very good job, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very insightful speech. I see that Alexei Chagatayev is here with us. He's also one of the experts of the panel, and he's a lecturer of comparative regional studies in Higher School of Economics, and also a contributor to Russian media about Chinese businesses, business marketing strategies. And one of his very important articles about the attractiveness of the Russian regions for Chinese businesses has created a lot of talks around it. And Alexei, I wanted to ask you to come back a little bit to the topic that we started with about what's the future for us as a just consumers in the market? Are we going to live in a world where we will be surrounded by the products that are not only made in China but designed in China? What's your opinion? What's our future?
Yeah. Can you hear me, by the way? Is it okay with my
Yes.
connection? Yeah, thank you so much for such a great representation. Yeah, I'm a specialist in the field of e-commerce and the PR and, let us say, communication. So the question right now for us as a communicators, for a PR specialist, is what is in the first place for the consumers right now? Is it a question of the ethic and the ethic consumption, or is it a question of the market and the market rules? Because right now we don't know for sure how world will be in the next 10 or 50 years, because for us it's a real question. What consumer is going to buy in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years? What is more important for the consumer? Is it the price? And if we are talking about the price, so we are not going to talk about the labor forces, about the labor disputes, about the ecology, about the economy, about the, I don't know, child force and about the child labor, because we are going to buy the cheapest price, and it's the main, I don't know, the main factor in this kind of solution. Or we are talking about the ethics, because even right now we are talking about the two different markets, because when we are going to China, for example, and when we are working with the Russian exporters, when we are talking about the mainland, and when we are talking, for example, about Beijing or about the, I don't know, about the food or FMCG products, we are talking about only about the price, because we say, guys, it's best price and the ecology of Russia is great. So please buy this very product because it was created on the Russian fields and it's very healthy. But when we're talking about, for example, about Hong Kong or Taiwan, we are talking about the ethic a lot, because when we want to sell a diamond, for example, we have to say that, yeah, it's a great diamond, the price is great, but it doesn't hurt, for example, Yakutia. It doesn't hurt a little bit Yakutia climate. The people in Yakutia are very happy because they have these very diamonds. The deers in Yakutia are very happy because they can live in Yakutia and they can sell these great diamonds. The children are very happy in Yakutia because it's also, because you do not buy a diamond, you buy a history about these diamonds, because it's a social responsibility, it's ecology, and it's also a great price. So right now, when we are talking about the future, before it was It was like it was the common rule that you buy something from China because it's cheap. So you do not think about the guys from Xinjiang Uyghurs autonomous region. You don't think about the labor force. You do not think about children. You do not think about the ethic, and you do not think about the ecology. You buy Chinese product because it's cheap. Right now, you buy Chinese because it's cheap, yeah, but you also buy Chinese because it's creative, because it's innovative, because it's in the field of IT, for example, it's a very on the age of glory, even right now. So right now we are talking about the contradiction. So what we are going to buy from China because of it's cheap and okay, or because of its innovative feature. So that's all, I think, yeah.
Thank you very much. Actually, we don't think a lot about the ethical problems in the business, but it's becoming a very important question in the 21st century. And talking about ethics, not in terms of business, but in terms of people-to-people relations, the society in China is also changing. And we've seen this trend for years now. And in Russia, the new ethics has become this buzzword of the last several months, I would say, and everyone is talking about this. But Olga Khlimanova decided to take a look at China. What is going on in the Chinese society? How is it changing, and what is the new ethics? Or if there are any concerns about the changing, normality. So the floor is yours, Olga.
Okay, hello everyone, and now I'm going to tell you about new ethics in terms of China. First of all, the 21st century is not only the era of scientific research, but also a so-called era of openness to solve problems and issues that can no longer be kept silent. I will consider the new ethics as the current engine of radical changes in Chinese society. But first of all, we should describe the situation in China. The feminism as a concept appeared in China since the discovery of the country by Europeans. The nature of the attitude towards women in the era of Mao Zedong was characterized by exceptional equality between men and women. The party forced the image of women who works for the benefit of the state in the same way as men. Popularized the expression "women hold half the sky on their shoulders." In parallel with the whole world, the struggle for women's rights began in China. European-style feminism was aimed at combating violence, equality in the workplace, and formerly not prohibited feminist organizations, which consisted mainly of young women, were engaged in education through the internet actions and public events. One of them is probably one of the most scandalous stories of the Feminist Five, when women in vegan dresses covered in fake blood went out on the streets of Beijing to distribute leaflets about sexual harassment. The girls were detained for 37 days, and they were asked about receiving financial support from abroad. The main reason of persecution is the fact that for communist government, any shocking actions and attempts to raise the public are attempts to destabilize Chinese society. Next slide, please. So why did they distribute leaflets of such content? Is there any doubt that harassment of any kind is not a norm? Let's go back to the origins. During the Qin dynasty, women had to prove that they were a victim of rape. Also, we should consider that Chinese society is extremely traditional, and you need to have the courage to accuse a person of rape or harassment. Not surprisingly, the Me Too movement in China, despite all the modifications, was blocked. It all started when a young woman reported harassment from her professor and encouraged other affected women to speak up. The professor was suspended, but the hashtag and all its equivalents were included in the list of the most blocked words on Wechat. According to the report by Guangzhou Gender Research Center in 2017, 69% of Chinese students have at least once been victims of sexual violence. Most of the questions are still taboo, but the younger generation does not agree with it. Of course, there are still few successful cases, but this doesn't mean that the situation doesn't change. Next slide, please. The aggravating factor to all problems that were listed above is the lack of sex education. Not all families welcome such education. Many parents consider such a lesson and lectures irrelevant. In 2020, the Family Planning Association and Tsinghua University Health Research Center and the Youth Association of China conducted a large-scale research about sexual life of students. It turned out that some teenagers blame self-satisfaction for depression, headaches, acne, poor grades, and failures during exams. The decision to abandon self-satisfaction is largely supported by the claims of traditional Chinese medicine, the theory of maintaining the harmony of the elements of yin and yang in the human body. Moreover, we should not forget about the legislative side of this problem. For example, in cases of teenage pregnancy, there is a high chance for the baby that he will not be registered at all. In China, there is a hukou registration system that divides citizens into urban and rural residents. It is strictly tied to specific region, and it's extremely high. It is extremely difficult to change it. Couples younger than the legal marriage age, 22 years for men and 20 years for women, are often unable to gain a hukou for their child. And without a residence permit, it is impossible to apply for secondary education, healthcare, open a bank account, or even to buy a train ticket. Next slide, please. Returning to the topic of the new ethics, it should be noted how specifically it affects Chinese society. First of all, this is a lack of fear to talk, discuss problem, defend your position, your personal space. Talking about sex with children, teenagers is necessary. Access to information that will increase the awareness of taboo topics, help avoid a lot of problems both in the present and in the long term. Then there is a desire to change traditional dogmas, which in modern society no longer have a place to be. It is not normal to beat anyone today, humiliate rape. It is not also normal to be silent about it and blame on yourself. The next step is to take concrete measures. Of course, it is quite difficult to talk about any actions in the context of communist society, but one way or another they are being taken, which means that the result will not be long in coming. Thanks for your attention. That's all I wanted to say.
Olga, thank you very much for this very important topic and for the great presentation. And also thank you for your perfect time management. It was exactly 7 minutes and I didn't have to interrupt you. Here I want to give the floor to Anastasia Muravyova, who is a co-founder of Sinatech Telegram channel and also a contributor of several media and analytical platforms as Carnegie.ru and Wanderzine and other great media. She also, in her work, looks dively into the problems of feminism and human rights in China. So, Anastasia, what is this new ethics? Is it new? And if in Russia we talk about this all the time, what about China? Can we say that the same processes are going on there?
Well, thank you, Tamar, for giving me the floor. I would say that new ethics as a term was coined in Russian infosphere and is mainly used for people who associate themselves with it. And I would say that I personally only view it as a ironical use when people try to simply include when people are trying to joke about new ethics, but in reality it's just simply including humane treatment of marginalized groups and support of their struggle to being treated as equals, compared to those who are more socially acceptable or advanced even in their legal status. And in her presentation, Olga talked about gender issues and lack of sexual education in China. And it's fair to say that these are just small parts of the whole spectrum of inequalities that people face in China due to their ethnicity, gender, hukou or household registration, level of income and education, and so on. And it could sometimes appear that China has definitely achieved progress in gender-related issues. However, if we see nowadays over 2,000 delegates at the Chinese Communist Party Congress, and fewer than a quarter of them are women. And again, if we look at the Politburo, this number barely climbs to 10%. And of course, we could say that that could be influenced by the sex ratio gap that was influenced by one child, one family policy. But however, since it was enforced in 1979, people who were affected are barely above the age of 40. And more than 50%, just barely more than 50% of the whole CCP is people over that age. So that is a huge disproportion that affects laws, that affects policies. And it could be seen, for example, in the anti-domestic violence law, in the treatment of domestic violence survivors or cases of domestic violence or divorces. Because firstly, there are different levels how we could look at that. Firstly, it's a big division between rural areas and urban areas, because, for example, some studies show that there is no real difference for rural women in the age, and they both report domestic violence when they're talked to about that. And it is heavily linked to families' financial status, for example. And it is important to talk about it for the main reason that while we are living through the pandemic, there is also a silent pandemic of domestic violence that is rising. And it is heavily linked to people being close with each other during lockdowns. Even it happened in China, even though the lockdown there was relatively shorter than in a lot of places, but still it was linked to that. And even in April in Hubei province, it was reported a threefold increase of cases of domestic violence, for example. And yeah, it is important to talk about that because there are systematic decisions in China that stop people from, well, for example, when filing for a divorce, there is such a thing as a cool-off period, which is a couple has to wait for 30 days to get their divorce officially. And it could be that people have to appear, both of the people from the couple have to appear at the same time at the police station or at the official bureau to get their certificates. And even if one of them does not show up, their marriage is not annulled and they continue being married. And yeah, that is rather it is rather disproportionately affecting women. For example, because while couples that come to this conclusion file for divorce and they don't have problems, but those who go to the court are actually the ones that most likely face some kind of some kind of violence or abuse in their household, just because another party is disagreeing with their decision to divorce. And for example, there are absolutely horrible pictures that it is very hard in China to get a divorce through the court, through the first trial. And it was said that there was a rise of such decisions. So the annual, between 2000 and 2016, the annual number of divorce requests courts granted through sorry, adjudication shrank by 11%, while the annual number of divorce requests denied by the court rose by 176%. And it is heavily linked to Xi Jinping in 2015 saying that the family is the main kind of is the main part of the society, and it's important to have harmony in the family. And exactly after his words, a lot of officials starting to ban people through systemic decisions or policies from getting the divorce, even though divorce rates are still climbing up. And again, gender issues is just a small fraction, and there is more discrimination in China than it is seen. And it is definitely a topic that has a lot of space to be discovered. And I think that Olga is making a great thing by doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anastasia and Olga, for raising the awareness about these problems that are not discussed a lot, at least here in Russia. And I guess, and I hope actually that in the future we will have the opportunity to talk about it, write about it, read about those questions, because these are really important issues that we should follow and analyze. And actually, in these problems that we've discussed right now, the reason for them, the big chunk of the reason lies on the media, which is state-controlled in China, as we know, and Chinese government uses it as a very successful tool to create certain mindsets and to influence how people think about this or that topic. And today we also have our another student, Valery Syachin, who took a look into how media worked during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how the Chinese government used it to, fight coronavirus, or maybe not coronavirus itself, but the opinion about it. So, Valery.
Thank you, Timur. Hello, everyone, and now I'd like to present the results of our research. And to start with, it is worth noting that coronavirus outbreak happened in China in the late December, and up to the Chinese New Blossom, it has spread around the country, causing enormous disruptions in transport chains, and had also led to lockdown in major and minor cities. During this period, the only efficient way to provide some public awareness was the mass media, especially various internet resources. So as Chinese media are tightly controlled by the government, they became an essential tool to influence public opinion during the stage of lockdown, which was in China from February 10th and up to the end of March. So the object of our research, please move to the next slide, is the Chinese media and their role in the Beijing's combat to the epidemic. We mainly analyze the official press, such as Renmin Zhibao, and internet publications of the unofficial media, which is presented by Beijing Zhibao, Renmin Wang, Huanqiu Wang, and etc. So on the next slide, you can see that our research found out the main topics that media covered, and they were as follows. The first type is official information, including statistics from National Health Commission of the People's Republic of China, and the steps of national government to fight the epidemic. The second type was topics about situation abroad, including various rumors concerning internal stability. And the last one, but not the least, also there was unique cases and punishment. They're concerning people and officials who somehow violated the epidemiological rules. So moving to the official information, the daily statistics during the early stage were objectively pessimistic due to the real state of affairs and the high number of new cases. Moreover, it was presented in a pessimistic way because new cases and heavy cases were placed first without a number of new successfully cured ones. But following the rise of the cured people, statistics has shifted to a more optimistic order. Because they started to present the number of new cases along with number of successful cured ones, that you can clearly see the dynamic of the overall epidemic situation. So national government actions, sorry, not yet. So national government actions were published mainly in the official press and highly welcomed Xi Jinping's role in the process of combating the epidemic. There were also motivational articles dedicated to the medic and party members' sacrifices. Beyond these topics, the media covered important economic measures that has been steadily undertaken by different state commissions and ministries. For example, the possibility of allowing couriers to enter closed gated communities raised a wave of discussion around the internet. So newest researches and scientific information were also circulating from time to time in both official and unofficial sources. Much of the last information were considered unproven, and even big unofficial media had been trying to avoid them until the official statement will prove or dispel it. So let's move to the next slide. It's about the situation abroad. In the mid-March, coronavirus outbreak happened in other countries around the globe, and it caused concern among the Chinese citizens of imported cases at that time. The situation was that when rumors started to spread across China and especially in Chinese social network Weibo especially there were a noticeable case that African citizens in Guangzhou can be the main source of imported case. So the local authorities were first to reply and to inform population about the real state of affairs. Even Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, during an official telephone communication with the chairman of the African Union Commission, stated that both Chinese and foreign citizens are treated equally. And the media and official channels tried to minimize the potential impact of this rising concern, and even Chinese embassies abroad replied on such rumors. For example, Chinese embassy in Moscow about the statement about the rumors that Russia officially recognized the coronavirus as artificial because it was misunderstanding. So about the last type, it's unique cases and punishments. The most successful articles were about the unique cases because they provided clear consequence of the violation of isolation regime. So the cases also took effect due to the lack of information about coronavirus ways of spreading and ambiguous data about the symptoms. As for the punishments, they were primarily covered a situation of negligent officials and this was a good story, bad story about Shandong province prison wardens. So all in all, let's move to the last slide. All in all, the mass media's impact to the establishment of trust between the government and the people were enormous. Also, publications had different information allocation. Almost every article, both official and unofficial, were dedicated to the government measures against COVID-19. It was helped to prevent people from going out from their homes during the lockdown, and made possible further cooperation between the people and the government at all levels. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it seems like the media was a very important tool in fighting this coronavirus. But I think another great instrument in hands of Beijing was technology. And actually, we have here Alexei Dzertyov, who is master student at the Higher School of Economics and also an intern there, working with one of the best China watchers in Russia, Vasily Kashin. And Alexei, what do you think about the role of technology during the COVID-19 pandemic in China?
Thank you, Timur, for introducing me, for inviting me to this conference. Well, first of all, we all remember the case of Li Wenliang, a doctor at Beijing hospital who started the so-called investigation into the coronavirus, and he was detained, and later he tragically died. Because of coronavirus infection, and this happened in early February, I guess. And at that time, even some unofficial, I mean, not non-state medias were able to publish some information and some investigations about the coronavirus in China. But later, the censorship system and the anti-rumors, some anti-rumors measures were implemented, and the Chinese government scrambled the censorship to act swiftly and fast to destroy all the rumors regarding the pandemic. And of course, the technology is one of the most important weapon of the PRC to combat with such rumors, and combining technology with strong police and security apparatus in the country, we could see that even some journalists who came into Wuhan in March and April, they were detained and they were questioned. So basically, even such a theme like coronavirus, which at first seems like a only one city problem, it quickly became viral, and even Xi Jinping, at first, he usually when we open People's Daily, Jimin Zhibao, we usually see him on the front page. But in early March and April, there was no even mentioning about him. And only later on, when the situation became more clear, and when the China became combating the coronavirus more successfully, we could see that he took all the measures personally and departed to the Wuhan and showed how China will deal with this situation. And all in all, we can see a very unique and interesting approach to this situation. And I believe that some Russian officials even noticed this, because some anti-fake bills were introduced in Russia. I believe they were also influenced by Chinese steps which were taking in the last year.
Thank you, Alexei, for your comment. And actually, I encourage everyone to, if you have Telegram, I am sure you have, to follow Telegram channel Sinatech, which is one of the best sources of information about Chinese technology and business. And Alexei is one of the co-authors of this great resource. Moving forward, I think not only the Chinese autocratic regime shows itself in terms of media and how it controls the information bubble inside the country, but also how it controls the autonomous regions and tries to integrate very different regions in one China. Today, Julia Sofia Kusela has done a research on that. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Timur. Yes, there are areas where different ethnic minorities have historically resided and were subsequently designated as minority autonomous areas, and they constitute about half of China's territory. The next slide, please. In particular, the areas of Tibet and Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia were in the focus of my research. First of all, they are the areas, for example, these two autonomous areas, Tibet and Xinjiang. In Tibet, almost half of Tibetans and the majority of Uyghurs reside, and they have this ongoing disputes with the central states due to the cultural, social, and differences in the way of just in their mode of life. These areas are extremely large in area size and are of significant importance due to its border geographical position and its size. The next slide, please. We can discuss China's policies towards various ethnic minorities that reside there. Undoubtedly, its policy is a multidimensional one. It has many components. On the one hand, some of the Chinese state policies have often been described as discriminatory. But although Chinese society has undergone dramatic changes during the past few decades, it still has shown little tolerance for political dissent from ethnic minorities. In fact, any signs of resistance from these ethnic minorities, often interpreted as separatism by the Chinese state, faces severe oppression and repression. Such discriminatory policies toward them can also be observed, for example, on the job market, when they are significantly disadvantaged. On the other hand, the Chinese government sees economic development and growth as the main solution for ethnic dissent and the threat of disintegration. Since China's economic reforms began in the late 70s, the jumpstarting the economy on the eastern coast and other border areas, it was essential for Deng Xiaoping for letting some of these regions to grow their wealth first, with the future goal to expand this wealth to the rest of the country due to its vast amount of resources. In reality, the development gap between the West, so-called the West and the East, significantly widened throughout the 80s and 90s. On the next slide, we can see the developing the economies of the Western provinces and further integration of them into the rest of the country had a nation-building function. Owing to this nation-building dimension, the VDP put emphasis on two strategic goals that aim to facilitate the better movement of goods and people between the Western regions and the core of China, which led to the better integration of the regions and the eradication of disintegration threat. The other focus was the implicit push for the migration of more Han Chinese to areas that are populated with ethnic minorities. But in reality, the most migration of Han Chinese into ethnic regions tends to occur in urban areas. Moving on, despite we can highlight these three regions and to conclude whether there was three regions and one policy or three regions and three different policies. Starting with Tibet, despite persistent resistance by Tibetans, the Chinese state's control over Tibet has nonetheless deepened during the past few decades. This manifested not only in ever strong security presence, but so more in the sense of deepening integration of Tibet with the rest of China, both economically, socially, and culturally. As it was the last autonomous region to be incorporated into the PRC, and due to its rough terrain, high altitude, and inaccessibility, Tibet is still arguably the least integrated region. Of all autonomous regions of China, Xinjiang is by far the most violent, and it had been marked by waves of ethnic riots for the past couple of decades. Of results of this attacks of local people, as well as overall deterioration of security conditions in the region, Xinjiang has witnessed a reversal of high Chinese immigration, because for the central state, it is a key component of its policy to move people from the center, so-called center, to Xinjiang. And finally, in Inner Mongolia, the Han Chinese migration and settlement have been a relatively long process, and today more than 80% of population are actually Han Chinese, while the Mongols have become an absolute minority. All in all, in conclusion, I would say that every region has its own policy. Nonetheless, its components and its main characteristic are being defined by both the ethnic the people who live in the region, its ethnic proportion, and some economic and geographical issues that arise in every area that the central state strives to integrate successfully.
Yulia, Sofia, thank you very much. Very insightful presentation. I would add to that these Chinese policies in these autonomous regions that don't look like other parts of China and are different became a major point in the criticizing of Beijing for the last several years. And the first country to do so was the United States of America. And actually, we've seen how China's actions in Xinjiang was called a genocide, and how China's actions in other areas in Hong Kong lead to creating sanctions against China. And here I want to give the floor to our last but not least participants of our today's conference, Burtsevallana, Gavriluk Yulia, and Turlukovskaya Yulia, to talk about the most significant confrontation that we're having in the 21st century, China against the US, whether it's something that was created by the previous US President Donald Trump, or it's something structural that has been going on for years and now just escalates. So, dear colleagues, the floor is yours.
Yes, I would like to start, and first of all, we would like to express our gratitude for the opportunity to participate in this conference. And already going directly to our issue, it's worth highlighting the next slide, please. The changing role of China in the post-biopolar depiction of the world as one of the most powerful centers is a discussed and relevant topic about the prospects for a new world order. The next slide. Also, we have defined the relevance of the problem. It's also an essential part, and you can see it on the slide in more details. And the main point is negative impact on the whole system of international relations. The next slide, please. The ancient Greek scholar Thucydides, describing the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, invented a political trap, and its essence is that there are two political giants, and they are fighting for power, and they absolutely must to face an uncompromising confrontation, even if it promises them only mutual decline or even their departure from the world arena. After the Cold War, a monopolar world order was established under the global dominance of the United States of America. However, soon new centers of power have emerged, and among these centers, China has certainly China also come up on top. The next slide. Over the past 50 years, China has made an unprecedented leap in its economic, political, and cultural development. If in 1917, China was not even close to the top with the gross domestic product, then by 2000, the Middle Kingdom took the sixth place in this indicator, and since 2010, it has not left the second place. At the end of 2019, the USA continues to be the leader of the world economy with the largest GDP, but at the same time, the structure of the GDP is asymmetric. For example, there are 80% of the USA GDP is the financial sector, while the GDP of China is also 80% of the real sector. So China has become the undisputed production workshop of the world, and the rise of China is also projected in the military area. Beijing has embarked on a large scale and ambitious military reform. So its goal to formate a modern, small, well-equipped, technologically armed forces. So it also should be mentioned that American political strategists took into account the experience of Athens and Sparta and the political wisdom of Washington strategists after the Cold War gave birth to the concept of Big Two, America, Chimera. The next slide, please. So the global dominance of the USA can only be challenged by two centers of power, China or Russia. So the rise of China in the 19th has not yet been noticeable as in the 21st century. Therefore, it seems promising to put potential opponents against each other. For this purpose, the concept of making alliance with China was proposed, with which the USA had already formed a fairly strong economic symbiosis that was based on overconsumption in the USA and China's export expansion. So Chimerica effect was global, and in America, many industries were becoming uncompetitive, and China, having become a global factory, invested not only in American debt, but in the largest technologies, infrastructure, human capital. So the 2008 crisis, to which Chimerica made a significant contribution, didn't lead to the destruction of the interdependence between these two states, didn't lead to the destruction their interdependence, but formed a significantly different balance of political and economic profits. So this fact that America strengthens China was made the main conclusion. It's necessary to stop the Red Dragon before it's too late. Then I would like to ask Lana to continue.
Thank you. We would like to talk about politics of Trump. The Trump administration looked at the international order as a field of open competition between states for influence. In keeping with the slogan "America First," Trump has begun dismantling the entire previous architecture of multilateral trade agreements. Trump preferred a one-on-one confrontation involving a much broader range of pressure arguments. The Trump administration assumed that the United States will be able to consolidate its advantages, but lost sight of the fact that in this regard, Washington opened up space for promoting multilateral initiative with the decisive participation of comprehensive regional economic partnership and the Belt and Road. After almost a year of preparation, the Trump administration has launched a trade war with China. However, by the end of 2019, there was a noticeable progress in the dialogue. January 15, Trump and Chinese Vice Premier Liu He signed documents on the first phase of the trade deal in Washington. This agreement does not lead to the dismantling of the chimeric model, but eliminates its most severe distortions that served China's interests. The actions of Donald Trump mean bringing the US policy toward China in line with the already formed attitudes of the American political elite, which eventually found itself in the Socialist trap even before the start of the Trump election campaign. Xi Jinping hinted at this fact in the fall of 2015, saying that there is no suicide trap, but when large states make strategic mistakes again and again, they can create such trap for themselves. Next slide, please. And what about China? China adopted the 10-year plan Made in China 2025 and focused on a comprehensive update of the technological basis of the Chinese economy and reaching the forefront in key areas of science and technology. China and the United States will create two competing global ecosystems for the development of the internet, big data technologies, robotics and so on. The choice of a techno-economic platform will be a geopolitical choice for all states actors in the system of international relations. I want to give a word for other. Yulia, please. Can you switch on can you show us next slide? Next, please.
Okay, I would like to talk about change of leader, peaceful path or conflict. How do all these development affect the strategic relationship between China and the United States? Xi Jinping emphasized that China is driven by peaceful intentions. In Settle 2015, he emphasized the importance of mutual understanding and called for a deeper understanding with the with the United States. We want to more understanding and trust and less alienation and suspicion. This will prevent misunderstanding and miscalculation. In Settle, he mentioned the Thucydides trap. There is no so-called Thucydides trap in the world, but if the major power repeatedly make strategic mistakes, they can create such traps for themselves. Thucydides pointed out that in content to the power of enemy, both Athens and Sparta formed alliances. China has formed alliances in the form of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Both countries have established asymmetrical trade relations, as evidenced by Russia-Chinese energy trade deals. As you can see in the slide, it is a ratio of military power. None of these alliances provide for military cooperation. Estimates of USA and Chinese military spending demonstrate the overwhelming superiority of the USA, its allies over China in terms of military spending. The logic of deterrence will force China to look for military partners among friendly states. The candidates of Russia suggest itself. The creation of such an alliance will not change the ratio of military spending too much. Next slide, please. Now I would like to make a conclusion. The United States are still the world hegemon. Their strength is undermined by military spending and ambitions. It took the United States more than a century to gain the political and economic power that made it a global hegemon. In the challenging from China, there is foreshadowing of a change leadership, a shift influence to the east. With the mandate of the American president, Trump has received at all the available tools of global hegemony. He chose to use it to solve the internal problem of the United States. The lesson of Thucydides is the formation of military alliance by Sparta and Athens led to destructive wars that undermine the power of both sides. Alliance can draw great power into ruins and unnecessary wars. It is all we wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Yulia, Lana, and another Yulia. That was a really insightful presentation. And I'm curious about the future of the confrontation, or maybe we are gonna see some positive directions in the China-US relations. And here I want to ask Andrei Fedotov, a head of Gimo Chinese Club and a contributor of Kommersant Publishing House and a alumni of Carnegie Moscow Center's internship program. Andrei, what is your opinion on the state of affairs between China and the US in the future?
Okay, so thank you, Timur, for giving floor. And also I want to thank you for inviting me to join this conference. Actually, at the moment, I personally would not make any long-term predictions about the future relations between the United States and China, but the meeting in Anchorage, in Alaska, between Yang Jiechi, Wang Yi, and Blinken showed us that the next 4 years will be very tough. And actually, as for me, I personally firstly thought that Biden's presidency would be some kind of like Obama's. And I mean that during the report, girls mentioned that maybe Trump can be seen as the man who started the so-called trade war, and maybe like the main leader, like I mean, ideology leader of conflict with China among the U.S. Leaders. But still, it is also important to mention that the true confrontation between China and the United States started during the presidency of Barack Obama. I mean that it was not as open as it became during Trump's presidency. Trump made the confrontation with China, as I think, something like more public, but still the first indications of the beginning of this conflict were made during Barack Obama's presidency. I mean, like the establishment of Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was aimed to limit China's economic opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region. And Obama worked on strengthening America's relations with its allies, I mean, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And firstly, I thought that Biden's policy towards China will be just as Obama's. I mean that the confrontation will be, but it will be not as public opened as it was during Trump. And moreover, I thought that they will find some kind of like common views on economic issues. I mean that the agreement on economics will be on trade, but there is still not. And like very tough statements of Americans diplomats showed us that there is no agreement between China and the United States, and we can say that the conflict, not like the conflict, but maybe the confrontation, especially we talk about Biden's presidency, will be more tough. And oh, sorry, just like my cat decided to broke the monitor. Now I want to say some words about the report. In this report, I especially liked that Lana and Yulia indicated the main reason of this new confrontation. And the United States understands that China can become as strong in terms of economic as the United States, and largely thanks to the activities of Washington. China itself has increased its economic opportunities from American investment, from a favorable economic trade and foreign policy regime of Washington. I mean, like from the era of Deng Xiaoping and down to the era of, I think, Jiang Zemin, not Hu Jintao, is hard to say. And like the absence of pressure from the United States over Taiwan for a long time, and some other issues. And moreover, maybe some little assistance to China in joining the World Trade Organization. And since the end of the Cold War, the United States has been dominated by an atmosphere of neoliberalism, and there was a book published by Fukuyama, The End of the History and the Last Man, and everybody believed that the end of history had become, and all countries will sooner or later become democracies with a liberal economy, and everybody will be open to the world. And this opinion was also about China. And the United States believed that the more liberated in terms of economy China will become, the more liberated it will be also in the political sphere. Like something like the political liberalization would follow China's economic liberalization. But this did not happen. And the realization that China really doesn't intend to deviate from the authoritarian model it became evident. And that is why the United States decided that it will be a very bad decision for them to support China in terms of economic, and that's why the whole thing started. And something like for the future. If you want to better understand US-China relations, there are two main topics that are needed to be explored. It is important to mention that you need to analyze US-China relations in complex. And actually, to say the truth, nowadays I'm just studying it, and I also don't understand many things. But still, firstly, you need to understand the economy of China itself. And at the moment, China is, I think, using the tools of a liberal economy. And using these instruments, they managed to build up significant wealth. And I mean both the wealth of the people, of the citizens, and the wealth of China as a state. And in these situations, the PRC itself remains a concubine. It needs to build up economic opportunities, otherwise the population will begin to become poorer back, and which will result in the loss of the Chinese Communist Party of the mandate of heaven, and the legitimacy in the eyes of the Chinese people. And now is the question, how to build up the economy further, how to ensure annual GDP growth of 6%. And during the last two sessions, there was approved a concept called double circulation, and the double circulation consists of an internal cycle, and it's something like the consumer demand of your own country, your citizens, and like an external cycle, exports. And some experts say that China is still not enough powerful to build up its economy on inner cycle. And that's the question, if they still are if they still need export, and to whom will China be able to sell the high tech and capital intensive products it intends to produce, if not the United States or Europe? And this is a quick question. So actually, my time is actually over. There's some words. Second, you need to study Chinese authoritarianism. The question is the reason of tough relations between US and China is like the rise of more harsh way of governing, which started since the Xi Jinping's presidency, or it is some kind of more structural decisions and like the evolution of Chinese power. And also you need to study more about sanctions, because the recent year was indicated with the first the first Chinese use of sanctions against the US. And you can read some works of Ivan Timofeyev, who is a program director of Valdai Club. I think that's all that I wanted to say, because we really don't have enough time. And I also want to thank our moderator for perfect timing, because we really made this in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was really helpful and insightful. I also encourage you to read Carnegie Moscow Center's publications, not only that are dedicated to US-China relations, but also to China and Chinese actions in Eurasia. So we're already out of time, and actually I think this is a good sign that this topic is very interesting, and we can talk about this for a long time. But this is really important that we had this conference today, and I am very, very grateful for your time, for the audience, for the experts especially. And this is a great honor to be on the one panel with you. And I hope that our today's discussions opened a little bit this box that China today in certain cases is, and now we have breaking some of the stereotypes and know a little bit more about this great and very interesting developing and in some cases already developed country. So thank you again very much. Thank you to the organizers for creating this platform. I'm sure that if you have any questions that you haven't had the chance to answer, to ask, sorry, you can direct them to the website. There is a email, or you can just write to me to any of the social media. You can find me anywhere. So with this, thank you very much. Have a great day and the upcoming weekend. I hope we will have other chances to talk about other issues about China. Thank you.
Timur, what do you think about like making a photo, some kind of like Chinese tradition to make a Zoom group photo in the end of the conference? Maybe if some people will turn
let's do
their cameras.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I see a lot of things in chat. So I should stop the demonstration for now. And if I might ask you to switch on your cameras for a second, I wanted to take, I don't want to interfere in your personal bubble, but please, for one photo, I just want you to switch it on. If you don't, or if you have some technical problems, that's fine. No worries at all. Yeah. Great. 1, 2, 3, smile. Once more. We have another one, once more. Great. So I can send these photos to someone, maybe from the organization team, and they will spread it to all of you. Thank you again. I guess we can finish our discussion at this. Thank you.
Thank you.